Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Studio 78 podcast. I am your host, Nache Snow. You can find me and all the show notes for every episode on nachesnow.com. That's NACHESNOW.com. All right, guys, I have another great guest for you guys today. I'm very excited to introduce Taffi to you guys. But before I do, just a couple of things. First, I hope you guys had an amazing Memorial Day holiday. I know I did. It went by way too fast, but I got a lot done. And one of the things that I got done was I created another page under resources on my website called The Bookshelf. So if you go to nachesnow.com/books, you will find my bookshelf. And on this page, I have arts and crafts books, business books, health and beauty, journals and planners, money, self-help, and success books. And some of the books I've read and I've loved, and some of the books I've heard over and over and over again be recommended by people that I respect and I trust. So if you're looking for a good book to make you, more successful in your career or in life, or if you're looking to go, let's say, the natural route when it comes to health and beauty, or you want some cool recipe books, or even if you're just trying to get back into journaling, head on over to my website. Again, that's nachesnow.com/books, and check out all the books. And all you have to do is click on the images and it'll take you right to the page so you can purchase it. Okay, so on to our guests. I have Taffi here from Thandos Shoes, and I first met her at the Tall Society event. And if you guys remember, the founder of the Tall Society, Bree, was on episode 8. So if you go to nachesnow.com/8, you can listen to her episode, which was on how face-to-face events build online community engagement. But anywho, while at her last Tall Society event that was in the DC area, she had some vendors there. And Taffi, along with her husband, was one of the vendors. And I got these cute flats there, and I loved them so much. I loved also Taffi and her husband, just their energy, what they were trying to do, their whole style and vibe. Like right then and there, I asked her if she could be on the show, and she said, hey, yeah, just reach out to me. So anywho, that leads us to this interview here. And so I won't go on too much because this is a longer episode, but I will say her story is like really amazing about like her journey of, saying like, you know what, I'm going to like leave my job, go back to school, and from there meeting her husband and then starting a very successful business. So she gives a lot of just great tips, just from starting a business, but just even from the story standpoint of how she was able to, kind of almost not reinvent herself, but, find a new path or find a new journey, and just takes a lot of risk along the way, to me is pretty amazing. Before we get in the episode, I do want to mention, I'll mention it at the end too, but she is offering a discount on her shoes. So if you go over to her website, Thandos, the H is silent, Thandos.com, and you find a pair of shoes you like, you can put in the code STUDIO78, that's STUDIO 78, to get 5% off your first pair of Thandos shoes. So anyway, I'll repeat that again at the end, and I'll also have the coupon code in the show notes. But without further ado, let's get to the episode. Here's Taffi. Hello, everyone. I want to welcome Taffi to the show. Welcome, Taffi.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Before we go into why you decided to start Thandos Shoes, I just want to go back to like before you started the business. Like, can you tell the listeners a little bit about like your background, your journey?
Sure. So I was born in Guyana, South America, and my parents migrated to the US in the 80s. So I was a baby when they moved to New York. And so I grew up most of my life in Queens and in New Jersey. So I'm very much a tri-state girl. Um, and I went to college at NYU.
Mm.
So I really got into New York City life very early on and started a career in finance after graduating with a bachelor's in economics. So I had an interesting pivot from a career in finance to the public sector. Back in 2008, New York State actually had its first African American governor, and Governor David Patterson. And having worked for a Black owned investment bank in Manhattan, the director of one of the largest agencies in New York State called on me to help him create a diversity program for New York State around women and minority owned investment banks, as well as law firms, accounting firms. So, really, a movement towards increasing participation for people of color as well as women.
Mm.
So, it just so happened that that was the year that the market crashed. I know if you remember that in 2008, Lehman
Yep.
Brothers went under, and it was just perfect timing. I switched career paths, and after working in government for almost 4 years, I decided it was time for me to go back to school and get an MBA. And so I
Mm.
decided to go back to my alma mater. I went back to NYU and I attended the Stern School of Business. And I had a completely different focus. I was focused on entrepreneurship, innovation, and global business.
Mm.
I always give credit to the amazing women and minority owned businesses that I worked with during my time in government because they really inspired me to want to go into business for myself. And I wasn't
Mm.
sure what that was going to look like when I started.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of took a leap of faith and quit my job and went back to school full time. So that
Mm.
was my life before Thandos.
Wow. Now, because I'm sure there's some listeners out there that might be debating about doing the same thing. Like, what type of, I guess, sacrifices did you have to make? Like, did you already have like enough savings set up where you were okay? Did you have to like move back in with your parents temporarily to kind of make that jump and go back to school full time?
Well, it was a tough decision, and I don't feel like I had enough saved to be honest.
Right.
I did not have enough saved. I definitely took out a lot of loans, and I had to be scrappy. I actually started a consultancy on the side while I was in business school. So I actually help
Ah.
small businesses figure out how to position themselves to get government contracts. So that was
Mm.
a business that my first startup was actually TW Advisory. So that was my first business. And that actually helped me through business school. I had a lot of interesting clients, and that helped me make some extra money. And then also as a student, and if people are considering business school, there are opportunities to be a graduate assistant or a teacher's assistant, and those are paid positions. So I did have
Mm.
a couple of graduate assistant positions while I was in school as well.
Now, because you hear people, I guess, like on both sides of the fence about going to school or going back to school. Did you find that beneficial? And do you think by going back to school, you were able to get where you are today?
Absolutely.
Mm.
Going back to school was one of the best decisions I ever made, especially shifting focus from, finance and going into entrepreneurship, kind of giving myself those 2 years to hone in on certain skills, how to create a business plan, how to really assess a startup. And even
Hmm.
giving myself time to travel, being that I was interested in starting a company that had a global footprint.
Mm.
It
Hmm.
really helped me. It helped open my eyes to what else was out there on a
Mm.
global stage. So I think it is important if you're going to make a complete career shift, taking the time to go back to school allows you to reflect. It allows you to learn new skills. And I guess the best thing that came out of business school was meeting my partner, my husband, JG. He was
Mm.
ahead of me. He was 1 year ahead of me at Stern, and we were great friends my first year, and it kind of blossomed into a romance and then eventually a business. And I wouldn't have met him if I hadn't have gone back to school.
God, that's amazing. So, yeah, so tell us about, okay, so of course you're back in school. So, how do you get from, of course, going back to school to like starting this business now? And, like, how did you come up with the idea and just kind of walk us through, like, I guess that the initial idea to concept?
Sure. So, in doing all of my global travel during my MBA, I was very much open to doing a traditional, like an internship that was non-traditional. So
Mm,
typically, the summer between your first and second year, your classmates are working for the big investment banks or the consulting firms. And I was interested in working for a startup
mm,
because one of the biggest questions I had to answer for myself was, do you want to go off and start your own business, or do you want to join an existing startup or early stage venture?
mm,
And so I decided to take an internship in South Africa, and JG actually helped me find this position because he had done his internship in Nigeria his first year, and he met another NYU master's student who had started her own gourmet tea company. And she had reached
ah,
out. She was looking for interns to help her with strategy and business development and marketing. And so I reached out to her and she offered me the position. It was an unpaid position,
mm,
um, but we were able to figure out how to also get funding for that. Most schools have funding. Well, NYU definitely had funding for non-traditional internships.
mm,
So that was a blessing. And so I went off to South Africa and worked on this startup. And I traveled with a pair of $10 foldable flats that I purchased from Dwayne Reed. And in New York
mm.
City, when you have to commute, most women have a pair of backup sneakers or flats. And so I always traveled with it, and I figured I'm working for this luxury tea company. Most likely I'm going to be in heels a lot, but I always need my backup flats. So all summer, the women I worked with and women that I met and became friends with were totally intrigued by this little $10 pair of flats. So
Mm.
my boss that summer, her birthday was coming up, and I told myself, I'm going to buy her a pair of these shoes because she keeps asking me about them. They'll make an awesome gag gift for her birthday. And I looked everywhere for these shoes and could not find them. So I looked, South Africa has like the equivalent of Walgreens. It's called Dischem, and another store called Clicks. They didn't have them. I checked the department stores. So I remember calling JG and asking him, well, do you know of anyone who might sell these in Nigeria? And he reached out to some friends there who worked in retail. It wasn't a product that was available there.
Mm.
So I kind of left it alone, but it was something that was in the back of my mind. And I celebrated my 30th birthday in South Africa, and my girlfriends there, we all had dinner, we had a little bit of a party, and I remember, we were all dancing, and someone asked me for my shoes. And I said, well, I'm going to need to wear them because I'm not ready to get out of these heels. And she offered me $100, like US dollars, for my $10 fast flats that had been beaten up and worn all over the place.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that's when the light bulb went off. I said, clearly there's a need for this product. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
it's not available here. I remember the next day calling JG, and I was like, yeah, I think there could be an opportunity for this product in South Africa.
Mm.
And I remember him saying, well, you know what? I get it, because he would always see me wear them. And he kind of brought a different approach to the business. He said, well, what if we incorporate a different type of business model instead of the traditional, you just make a bunch of shoes and hope people like them. He had studied a model called crowdsourcing.
Mm.
And that whole concept is people voting on what they like in terms of design or even
Mm-hmm.
submitting designs. And then you use that data from your community voting. And the ones with the most votes, that's what you put into production. And so that's where we adopted that model very early on. And I believe that's the model that's really kind of helped us distinguish ourselves from a lot of other ballerina flats brands, as well as
Mm-hmm.
incorporating African fabric.
So what year did you end up like saying like, okay, you know what? We're gonna make this into like a legit business.
So it wasn't until I would say 2000, the end of 2014,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
because after I graduated, JG got a job offer in Nigeria. And when I came back from South Africa and started my second year of business school, I had this idea we're going to start this flats company. And I started working on the business plan in my second year. And I even did an independent study. So it almost became like my thesis.
Mm.
But it's very difficult to start a business that's supposed to be started on the continent from the US.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to take another huge leap of faith and move with JG to Nigeria.
Oh wow.
So I completely left everything I knew and moved to Nigeria. He took a position with Viacom as their head of business development in Nigeria. And I said, I'll move to Nigeria. I did work full time for a PR marketing firm while I was there, but I was still kind of developing the business plan on the side.
Okay.
So as we were working on it together, it was like 2014, the end of 2014, that we decided that this business needs to be something that we put our all into, because I had done a pitch competition in Nigeria. There's an organization called She Leads Africa.
Mm.
And we wanted to really see, is this a viable business? Do people really want this? Is this something that would work in this market? And we submitted our application. We were selected. I was able to pitch and I placed third place.
Oh
And
wow.
this time we had no product in the market. We just had a sample. And the two other businesses that came first and second had like product or a service already in the market. So we knew it
Mm.
was at that point, we're like, this is something that can work. People
Mm-hmm.
actually want this type of a product. And we both doubled down. He left his position at Viacom. And we both decided to really just go in full time and build the business out. And so that was like the end of 2014. And we sold our first pair of shoes in February of 2015.
Wow, that's like a the third leap of faith. Like,
Yeah.
so um so yeah, so how did you go about just figuring out even how to get something manufactured? Because this is like the first product based business you've had, right? So how did you had this idea, you had to come up with like a concept, but how did you even figure out and find like where you should go to source the materials and get it made and like all that other good stuff?
Well, a lot of that was us being resourceful and tapping into our networks.
Mm,
So, business school was a huge help. The fact that I was able to work on the business plan while a student and talk to professors who had retail backgrounds. I was able to get a good sense of how the supply chain works for footwear.
mm,
Um,
mm-hmm.
but just having friends in the design and fashion community in New York also helped. So we were able to
Ah,
be connected to our first footwear designer through a friend of ours who was in the design world in New York City.
mm,
Uh, and that first footwear designer had done work for brands such as J. Crew and Ralph Lauren. I mean, he was a very, you know, I would say well sought after designer. And he
mm,
was actually exiting um, the Camuto group at the time. So if you know Vince Camuto, they also own Nine West and Lucky Brand,
Oh yeah.
sitting and trying to start his own business. So
Mm-hmm.
it was a perfect time. And he helped us come up with the initial kind of prototype that we were working with. And once we had that, we decided that we were going to test out different materials to put on the shoe. And initially, we weren't going to do only African fabric. We had, played around with different vegan leathers and, your standard ballerina flat.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until we started selling, in our first collection, we had 5 styles. And the shoe that sold the most was the shoe that had the Ankara fabric from Nigeria.
Mm.
And the fabric itself, sourcing it, we went to one of our local markets, and I remember JG actually went to pick the fabric out, and it just, it stuck out to him because it was a bright yellow fabric with this design, this black design that looked like lips. So in the market, they call the fabric Kiss, or and so we came up with the name of the first Kiss because that was our first design that we put out.
Oh, cool.
Of Ankara fabric. And that shoe, we sold 90% of that shoe in the first 3 months.
Wow.
It was a hit.
Clearly. Wow.
Yeah. So from that point on, we said, you know what? We should stick to selling shoes with Ankara fabric because there were other businesses out there already that were selling black and brown and all the other colors in leather or vegan leather. So that's really how we got it started. Now, in terms of finding the right manufacturer, that took us almost 2 years. So, and I'm counting from, the time I started working on the business plan, we'd been looking for a factory, and it took us such a long time because most factories, 90% of the footwear in the market today that you purchase comes from China. And so finding a factory that will work with a small business is very tough. And it took us almost 2 years, but we found a factory that's woman owned, a smaller factory. We got to build a relationship with them, and they were willing to work with a much smaller minimum. And they had excellent quality that, our customers till this day are very happy with.
And also at this time, like, how long did it take you even to like build out your website? Did you have a website at the time? Were you selling it mainly off of social media? Like, how did you guys work that out?
Well, our website is of a disaster. Yes, e-commerce, is these days, it's very simple. But if you go back to, 2012, when we first started, ideating the business, like, hey, we're doing a fashion business. We want our own robust website. We didn't even think of Shopify at that time, and maybe that was the early beginnings of Shopify.
Probably.
But we sought out, through a referral of a friend, a company to build out this website for us that was going to be spectacular. And this was like our first failure. We put $10,000 into a website that did not work. So that was the most painful thing ever. And just to kind of give you a comparison, the website that we have today cost us next to nothing because we were able to get an intern from NYU to help us build it out. And it's, such an awesome website. It's on the Shopify platform. And this goes to show you how awesome technology can be and how dishonest some people can be,
No, you hear stories about that all the time, and people end up with these terrible websites.
Oh yeah, it was bad, and it caused us a lot of sleepless nights. But we definitely learned, especially in business, when you're starting up, you have to figure out how to use technology to your advantage. There are a lot of templates out there for you to use to have a very successful e-commerce business. And
Mm-hmm.
so many services that you can outsource, from your logo to your even handling of some of your social media. So you don't have to go spending tens of thousands of dollars to, get good service.
Now, did you, because of course I know since I bought my pair in the US, you sell in the US, but did you start out like in Africa selling it and then eventually like went to the US and other places, or were they available for like the entire, most of the country, from day one?
So when we started off, we were only selling in Nigeria. So our
Okay.
first year in business, so 2015 was strictly Nigeria because we were still um, based there full time.
Okay.
And we were very scrappy because, again, we didn't have a website. So what we were doing was literally we partnered with a number of online retailers. There's a retailer by the name of Jumia, and
Mm.
Jumia is like the Amazon of Africa.
Mm.
And we had our products on their platform. We worked with another online startup called heels.com.ng.
Mm.
They were like the Zappos of Nigeria. And so
Okay.
we just found platforms that we could place the shoes on, have awesome product shots, and get the shoes sold. And then we also just went door to door. I mean, we were going to friends, law firms and businesses, to people's homes. We would do different pop-ups.
Mm.
We were just really scrappy, and
Yeah.
it paid off. In that first, 6 months, actually less than a year, maybe 6 to 9 months, we sold over 1,000 pairs of shoes. So
Wow.
we worked really hard.
Mm.
And then we brought the product to the US after people started inquiring about Thandos. Um, we partnered with an online retailer in the US, and they had our shoes up for a few months. And we were able to gauge just how much interest was coming from this market. And that's what caused us to say, you know what, we need to actually build out an e-commerce page of our own to be able to
Hmm.
satisfy the demand here in the US.
And, I see like, for social media, like you have almost like 15,000 on Facebook and then you have several thousand on Instagram. Did you start building a following before the product was built, right after the product was built? And then, what are some of the lessons learned just from like trying to build an audience using social media?
Well, we started building the following even before the product was available. And I think part of building a brand is to let your customers, your followers into your world. You know,
Mm-hmm.
even express to them via social media. We had some serious hiccups in Nigeria in terms of getting our product through the ports to start selling.
Oh.
We ended up missing our first Christmas in Nigeria because there was a major strike at the ports.
Oof.
And that was a very, very painful time because in retail, most brands do about
Yeah.
70 to 80% of their business during the holidays. So
Yeah.
we decided
Oof.
to launch during the holidays. So that was really tough for us. Um, but after like having gone through that, we felt like we could do anything.
Right, right.
Through anything. And in turn, when we started selling in the US, we made sure that we built in enough time in our production window. If we set a date for delivery, we knew to give ourselves a cushion because we've dealt with the worst in Nigeria.
And then so you're kind of like, building this following so people now when they vote for the patterns for the shoes, are they voting on your website or are they voting on social media?
So they're voting on social media,
Okay.
and they're also voting. We use a platform called Typeform, and so that
Yeah.
does and that's it's a free platform, and you can create a survey. And so we would have pictures of the shoes, and it takes less than 2 minutes. I think you were able to do it at the Tall Society brunch, but you
Right. Yeah.
literally just scroll through and you're able to select the shoes that you like, submit your email address. And so we take that data And that informs us in terms of what we're actually going to put into production.
I mean, and I'm assuming that probably in itself too may have helped with social media or getting followings, because I feel like people love voting on stuff.
Oh, yeah.
You
People
know?
love to have their opinion heard or their voices heard. So yeah, in terms of social media, a lot of it did just happen organically. And to be honest with you, we haven't even reached our potential yet in terms of social media, because it's just been myself and JG really handling that. We haven't really found someone to really manage our social media presence. I think we've done an okay job so far, but
Great. Yeah, I'm like 15,000 almost. That's like pretty impressive.
yeah, I guess so. We try our hardest to, keep our customers engaged and be very transparent about our process. And if things are delayed for any particular reason, and get their input from things as simple as, what color hang tag we should put on the shoe bag. These are the types of things early on that we ask customers about our slogan, about little things, as well as letting them know, sometimes highlighting some of our customers and how they wear the shoes and style the shoes. So we just try and give them a glimpse into the world, the Thandos world, really.
And then you know what? I just noticed. Did I say I'm calling it like Thandos, but is it really Thandos?
Well, yeah, the H is silent, so it's a common mistake. But Thando actually means love in Xhosa, and Xhosa is a South African language. It's actually Nelson Mandela's native language, and it was a name that was given to me while I was in South Africa. So we ended up using it as the business name. It wasn't even my idea. One of my classmates, we engaged her to help us come up with names for the business. And at the top of her list of African names was Thando. And I turned and I looked at JG and we started laughing. We're like, we've had this name all along. This is my nickname in South Africa. Yeah, because my name Taffi means beloved. So my girlfriend's name Thando, which means love. And that's the name they call me. If you see anyone on the street calling me Thando, that means they met me in South Africa.
Oh, wow. And then I just wanted to talk about, because it's like, I feel like you have kind of a business with a purpose, right? It's supporting African women. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I believe it's like supporting African women in fair trade. And so why that's important to you, and then how is your business like helping them?
Sure. So when we started off sourcing our fabrics from the local market, so this was an interesting lesson that we learned. I mentioned to you that we sold out of that first Kiss collection in like 3 months. And when we went back to the market to buy more fabric, the sellers in the market would say, it's out of season. We're not going to get this fabric back again. And that doesn't help us as a brand who wants to now create more shoes for this growing demand that we have.
Right.
So we were really confused. It was, well, isn't this fabric produced right here in Nigeria? No. The answer was no. It's actually produced in China, or produced in the Netherlands and copied in China and shipped here. And so we were blown away. We were like,
right, like what?
Everyone's running around wearing Ankara fabric and thinking it's African fabric, and
right.
only African by use, not by origin.
Interesting.
Yeah, interesting fact, right? So we said, okay, how can we actually change this narrative? And so, our first collection that we did in the US, we wanted to ensure, okay, even if we're buying this fabric in the local market, we want to make sure that we're supporting the women in the market. Because we found when we went into the local fabric markets, the women sellers had a lot more perspective on, what was trendy or what was a nice pattern versus the men who were selling. And they tended to not have as many customers as the men. And so it was like our way of supporting them by making sure that we sourced all of our fabrics from the women in the market. So that's how we started. But then again, after learning where the fabric really came from, we said we want to really reclaim African print for Africans. So we decided to figure out how we can work with African artists to create their own prints that we could feature on the shoes.
Oh.
The best way to do this, because when we sell shoes in the US, customers typically ask, oh, does this fabric have a meaning? Is there a history or story behind it? And there really isn't one, because again, it's not something that was designed by an African, and that it had a particular story. So we wanted to marry the design with a cause. So in looking at some of the biggest issues plaguing Nigeria, one of them is severe flooding. So every year, 600,000 families roughly get displaced by flooding in Nigeria. So imagine, I was speaking to someone the other day and they put it in perspective for me. They're like, wait, so a Hurricane Katrina takes place in Nigeria every year and no one's talking about it?
Yeah, that is, wow.
That the magnitude of 600,000 families being displaced, that's almost, that's well over 1 million people, almost 2 million people. That's a lot. And that's devastating. And so one of our friends in Nigeria, and I got a chance to get to know her over a couple of years, she started a nonprofit that helps internally displaced people. Her nonprofit is called Cessor. And one of the biggest initiatives that they ever did was help these flood victims. And so we thought that that was a very worthy cause. And we commissioned a design competition, and we got artists to submit designs, young Nigerian artists who in no other way would they have an opportunity to create designs that would end up in a global marketplace.
Right.
We came up with these awesome designs, and we took those designs, put them on our social media, and allowed people to vote on the designs that they felt, were most interesting. And this young woman by the name of Chioma, she's a 27-year-old young Nigerian woman, her design was the one that won. And she did such an awesome job really telling the story of these flood victims. The designs themselves have these huge water droplets and then a zigzag pattern that represents the water flows as well as the tin roofs in these communities where the people are living. And it's substandard conditions. And then you'll find these small little triangles around the shoe, and those small triangles represent umbrellas. And they're so much smaller than the water flow and so much smaller than the rain droplets. So it's telling the story that this problem, the floods, are so much bigger than any little umbrella can protect these people from. So it's moving and it's compelling, and part of the business model is to give a royalty to Chioma for every shoe sold, and also to give some proceeds to Cessor so they can help more and more flood victims.
Wow. And you're right. Like, they're getting exposure that they probably would have never gotten before, Now they're right. Their shoes are being worn by people, across the world, which is pretty cool.
Yes. So we're excited. We're really excited about that.
And then I just wanted to find out, like, what are some, like you mentioned the website is one, but for other people out there that are thinking about starting a product-based business, what are some of the other maybe just lessons learned along the way that you could pass on to those folks?
Well, I said the number one lesson has really been you have to be persistent. In business and in anything, follow-up is so important. There are going to be opportunities that come your way in terms of people who can help you access, different markets, different individuals, from investors to advisors. And if you don't follow up, that's where you end up missing out. Having a business has just helped both JG and I become a lot more diligent with our follow-up, as well as making sure that we tap into our networks. Like I have a friend, he has a quote, your network is your net worth.
Mm.
And that's so true because so much
Mm-hmm.
accomplished in the business to date has been through people in our networks who've helped us in all areas. Again, from tapping into our NYU community to help us build out our website, in terms of tapping into our friend base for our designers. It's just been, an awesome ride. But if you're not persistent, it's never going to really come to pass. You have to be persistent.
No, that is great advice. And then what's the future for the company? Like, it's been like a couple of years now. So what are you guys looking forward to? Are you guys going into different product lines or yeah, I'm just curious, like what's next for you guys?
So we're excited about partnering now with different boutique retailers across the country. And even, we just signed our first boutique in Canada. So we're just excited about growth, about really expanding not just on tohn-dos.com, but with other retail partners in different cities in the US and across the globe. So when we started, we were only, selling in Nigeria and in the 50 states, but now we're able to do, global shipping, and it's an exciting part of the business to kind of really grow and expand outside of just these two markets. In terms of other products, we're not going to release any new product lines just yet. We really want to the ballerina flat and really just grow our distribution as much. So that's really been the focus for the near future. But we're definitely, our long-term goal is to be, the Ralph Lauren of Africa, and really have a full suite of products that we can provide and allow customers to have a window into African culture and art.
Wow. Go you guys. And I just want to say too, before I go to the wrap-up questions, for those folks out there, they sell size 6 to 15. And so I actually met Taffi at the Tall Society event. And for those of you guys who listen to the podcast, that was Bree, she was on episode 8, but so she was there, and for those of you all who know me, I'm like a size 13, so I have really big feet. So I just think it's amazing that you guys go from little tiny feet to like big feet. So you guys definitely have to like check them out.
Well, thanks for pointing that out because, that was another blessing that came along with starting the business in Nigeria, because the average shoe size in most of Africa is, it's not a size 8, it's more like a size 10, 11. So,
Ah.
yeah. So the reason we ended up going up to a size 15 is because we had customers who were demanding sizes larger than a 12, because initially we went up to a size 12. So it just worked out that when we actually started marketing in the US, that there are so many women. When we did our research, 30% of women globally wear larger than a size 10 or 11. So I feel like brands are just really missing the mark and ignoring a huge segment of the population by not carrying sizes bigger than a 10 or 11. So
I completely agree. So it's like brands, wake up, please,
wake
because
up.
we have big feet. And we want to wear cute shoes.
There you go. Cute shoes.
Right. Not the ugly shoes. We want cute shoes. So just a couple of quick wrap-up questions. The first question is, have you discovered your passion? If so, what is it? And if not, what are you doing in order to discover it?
That is a very deep question.
I know, right?
But I do feel that I have discovered my passion. I do have a passion to help others, to serve others. I've known this for a long time. And, outside of Thandos, I serve on a couple of boards, and I definitely have a passion for education.
Mm.
And, part of growing up, and being an immigrant, technically, is seeing, especially in a country like America, there's so much disparity in terms of just access to opportunities. If someone's just provided, quality education, quality healthcare,
Mm-hmm.
quality services, just how much of a better life they're able to have. And I think
Mm.
in anything that I've done, I've always been passionate about how do we create access and opportunities for other people. So from my position as a trustee at NYU, or a trustee for an organization called New Jersey Seeds that helps underprivileged youth get access to, private education in independent schools and boarding schools. I actually went through that program myself. So they're one of the programs that changed my life, and I'm now back serving in a capacity there to help others. And
Oh,
even with
wow.
those, in terms of providing opportunities for these artists to make an honest living and to get their work out there. So that's like the underlying theme of my life.
Mm.
So I know that that's my passion, and anything that I do, I look to serve those who don't traditionally have access.
And what is one thing that you cannot live without? It could be anything, take technology, food, a person, furniture. It could be anything, but it's like you need to have it.
Ooh, well, the most obvious for me is I can't live without God. I'm a firm believer in God, so that's my number one. But from a very natural plane, I cannot live without. I can't live without tea. Like I am.
Oh.
Yeah. I was thinking about this earlier, and I said, really, what can't I live without? And the one thing that I do not go a day without having is a cup of tea. It doesn't matter how hot it is. I need to have a cup of herbal tea. It's so
Mm.
important.
Now, do you have a favorite brand?
Yes. My favorite brand, it's called Traditional Medicinals.
Mm.
And right now, I've just discovered fennel tea,
Mm.
Fennel, fennel,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
and it's a seed, and it has this really like pungent aroma, but it's
Mm.
so soothing to the stomach, and there's no caffeine, but it's so good. It has like tons of benefits. So listeners, Google fennel tea and the benefits, and I'm sure you'll probably go out and buy a box or two. It's so good.
I have to check this out. Yeah. I've recently, like as of like the beginning of this year, switched for the most part from coffee to tea. So I'm always in search of like good teas. You know?
I think you'll like fennel.
And then just the last question is where can the listeners find you? Please let them know what your website is and any social media handles you'd like them to have.
Sure. Well, you can follow our Thandos journey at www.tohn-dos.com. And remember, Thandos has an H, so Thandos. And on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, we're at Thandos Shoes. And if you want to follow me personally, I'm at Taffi Time on Twitter.
Perfect. Well, Taffy, thank you so much for coming on to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. This was really fun.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. I know I did. I just loved hearing her whole story. I thought she had some amazing tips. I just wanted to mention a couple things from her lessons learned, be persistent. And, persistence is everything, right? Like even when she talked about how the strike at the port, made them miss their first Christmas. They could have just been like, oh my God, this isn't meant to be. Let me just give up, whatever. But no, it was like they kept on at it. They kept doing what they needed to do. It took a couple years to find a manufacturer. That's okay. Like you need to have that persistence, like, okay, I'm going to get this done no matter what kind of comes my way. And then she also says, like, follow up is so important. And I do believe that, like, you do need to make sure that you follow up on things. Like, even in my business, like, I don't think that in my career and even in my entrepreneurial efforts, if I didn't follow up on different things, that they would have never came to be. And then she mentions tapping into your network. And that is really, really important too, because I think sometimes when people start businesses, they're like, oh, well, no one knows about me, or how can I really get started? Yada, yada, yada. But the thing is, you don't realize how many people you know, like even starting with your Facebook people or the people at your job, or if you take dance class, for example, like the people you take class with, like you have this network of people that you can leverage and you can use them to not only bounce your ideas off of, but to kind of spread the word about whatever you're trying to do. So, anyway, I thought those were just some great lessons learned. I thought that her whole story was amazing. I hope you did too. Please let me know your thoughts by commenting on the show notes for this page, which will be at nachesnow.com/23. So that's nachesnow.com/23. Also, as I mentioned in the intro, if you go to Thandos.com, that's Thandos.com, and purchase shoes, you can get 5% off with the code STUDIO78, and that's just Studio, STUDIO 78. So the number 7-8, or numbers 7-8. All right, so please go over there and support that, because I think it's not only for a great cause, but they're amazing shoes. Now, I will say for my shoes, and I do have big feet, okay, size 13s, I did order a size up, as I think I'm right at the end of 13. So sometimes 13s, depending on who makes the shoes, sometimes I might have to go up or not. So know that you might want to go a size up depending on how your feet are. But let me tell you, I wear those little shoes everywhere, and I cannot wait to get my second pair. Okay, so with that said, thank you for joining in for another episode. If you have not already, please rate me on iTunes. If you go to nachesnow.com/iTunes, it'll take you to the iTunes page. If you're listening to this through the Apple Podcast app, if you type in, of course, and you probably already did this, Studio 78 podcast or Studio 78 Nache Snow, I come right up, and there's like a little review tab. If you go in there and give me 5 stars, I'll greatly appreciate it. If you're Android and using Stitcher, you could also rate me there. And as always, no matter if you're Android, iPhone, Windows, BlackBerry, maybe, you can share the episodes, and that also really, really helps me spread the word. All right? Until next week, take care, you guys.